Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to DTX.com, your resource for everything Yamaha electronic drums and DTX gear related. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can utilize the DT50S snare drum trigger with the Multi12. Now, the DT50S snare drum trigger is a dual zone trigger, meaning you're going to be able to produce up to 2 different sounds or voices. As an example or playing surface that I'm going to be using the trigger with, I have a 14 by 5.5 recording custom aluminum snare drum. I'm going to attach it onto the rim, reinforce it down, don't over tighten it, just enough to where it grabs onto the rim and stays in one spot. So now I'm going to be able to produce a sound on the rim of my snare drum and on the snare drum head of my snare drum. Now we need to plug the DT50S into the back of the Multi12 module. You're going to notice a couple of different inputs. Which one do you plug it into? So input number 13 is a 3-voice input. So in this case, I would use my XP80 pad in input number 13 because it has 3 dedicated voices or zones that I can produce. With the DT50S snare drum trigger, that's not the case. It's only going to produce 2 zones, so it will not work in input number 13. Only use 14/15 and 16/17. Now we need to tell the Multi12 that I'm using the trigger. It needs to recognize it as so. So you're going to hold shift on the face of the module and press utility. And then you're going to hit the scroll over arrow to the right one time, and you're going to see pad come up. Go ahead and hit enter. Now, go ahead and just strike the rim of the snare drum in this example. And as long as you have it plugged into the correct inputs, you should see the inputs change on the LCD screen on the face of the Multi12. So in this case, I have it plugged into 16/17. When I strike the rim, it comes up as 17, and when I strike the center of the snare drum, it comes up to 16. So I know that there's a signal being transferred. We have to choose the type that we're using, whether we're using an XP pad, a TP pad. In this case, I want to assign the DT50S snare drum trigger to the Multi12. So I'm going to scroll over with the minus and plus arrows until I find DT50S snare. And once I see it, we're going to hit store, hit enter. Enter is going to blink. It's going to say, hit store, are you sure? Yes. And so now I have my DT50S snare drum trigger stored with the Multi12. Now, I'm going to assign voices to my trigger. If you look above the kit button on the face of the Multi12 module, you'll see the voice button. Go ahead and press that. So when I strike the rim and assign a sound to the rim of my snare drum, you can hear a sound being produced. Now I can change the category of sound if I'd like, such as if I want a snare drum sound or maybe a kick drum sound if I wanted to, an electronic sound. There's a ton of different categories of sound that I can assign to both of the zones of my snare drum using the DT50S snare drum trigger. That's a cool sound. I'm going to leave it as is. Now I'm going to assign a sound to the face of my snare drum in the other zone or voice. And there I have a whip slap sound. So once we've chosen the voices that we want assigned to our snare drum with the DT50S snare drum trigger, we're going to hit store, hit enter. Enter is going to blink. It's going to say, hit store, are you sure? Yes. And now I have a user bank created, user bank number 1, with those assigned voices that I assigned to the DT50S snare drum trigger.